Hello, my name is Kendra. I am 28, and 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Now I'm sitting here wondering whether I'm about to lose everything, and I'm being portrayed as the evil guy in all of this. When Austin and I first met, I swear I felt like the luckiest woman alive. This dude was fascinated with me in the most positive way possible. Every day he would tell me how lovely I was, how fortunate he was to have me, and how he couldn't believe I was his. And how did he touch me? That was everything, girl. He'd smack my buttocks as I passed past him in the kitchen, pull me in for random embraces throughout the day, and kiss my neck while I was cleaning dishes. Even innocuous touches would get him worked up and, obviously fired up. At first, I soaked in that attention. My friends would roll their eyes when I brag about Austin's inability to keep his hands off me even after 3 years together. Sarah would say it must be good to have a boyfriend who still behaves like he's dating you. And truthfully, I felt fairly smug about it. I was with this amazing guy who was still head over loves for me, and her husband hardly looked up from his phone when she stepped into the room. But suddenly, things became extremely tough. Work was a nightmare with all of these new demands and deadlines. My mother was dealing with health concerns, and I was often fatigued. Austin's relentless physical attention began to feel more like pressure than love. Every hug got him eager, and every kiss made him aroused. It was as if he couldn't simply touch me without it turning into a sexual encounter. I started to notice it more and more. We'd be watching TV, and he'd pull me close, and within minutes, I could feel him turning on just by having me against him. Or I'd give him a quick kiss goodbye in the morning, and he'd attempt to deepen it, getting all worked up before I left for work. It was as if my body served as a trigger for him, and it began to make me uncomfortable. Austin never pressed me for anything. He'd become excited, but he never made it my responsibility to deal with. He would just adjust and move on. But I began to feel as if I couldn't simply be affectionate without it turning into something sexual for him. Couldn't he just hug his wife without his body reacting this way? My friends began to get on my nerves, constantly asking how things were going with Mr. Perfect, and making jokes about how Austin would definitely climb the walls if I wasn't in the mood. They had no concept how annoying it was to feel like every touch had sexual energy. I just wanted normal affection sometimes, rather than everything being about pleasure. Looking back, I can see how I built up animosity over something that should have made me feel cherished. But it felt overwhelming at the time, especially given how anxious I was about everything else. I began to pull back slightly, not reciprocating the touches as much in order to establish some distance. But Austin did not appear to notice my signals. He remained the affectionate, physically receptive husband he had always been. I convinced myself that he should be able to sense my mood more accurately, knowing when I wanted comfort rather than sexual energy. But I never did tell him that. I simply expected him to figure it out somehow. And when he didn't, I became increasingly frustrated. Everything was prepared to blow up, and I had no idea how awful it was going to go. So there I was, all coiled up from weeks of feeling like Austin couldn't touch me without turning me on, when everything eventually exploded. It was Tuesday night, and I'd had a terrible day at work. Everything that could go wrong did, and I returned home just wanting to unwind and possibly watch some mindless TV with my spouse. Austin could tell I was stressed from the moment I came in. He's always been good at reading my moods, which is something I enjoy about him. He served me supper, asked me a few questions about my day, and let me vent as we ate. After supper, I was sitting on the couch still tight when he walked over and began gently massaging my shoulders. It felt fantastic at first, quite good. His hands were loosening the knots in my neck and shoulders, and I was finally beginning to relax. But then he leaned down and gently kissed my neck using his hands to caress my arms. Within about 2 minutes, I could feel him pressing against the back of the couch, and he was becoming aroused again. Something inside me has just snapped. All of my accumulated annoyance and irritation erupted, and I whipped around and shouted, "You always sexualize me, and it's disgusting." The remarks came out harsher than I intended, but I was tired of feeling like I couldn't get consolation from my own husband without it becoming sexual. Austin stepped back, like if I had slapped him. His expression became utterly blank, and neither of us spoke for a moment. Then he remarked gently, "I can't help being attracted to my wife. I am a young, healthy male Kendra. This is normal," but I was already too wound up to hear reason. "Just stop," I instructed him. "It is bothersome. I can't even receive a normal embrace from you without you getting agitated. It's as if you can't touch me without invoking sexual thoughts." Austin appeared hurt in a way I hadn't seen before. "I don't make it about sex," he explained calmly. "I can't control how my body reacts to being near you. I've never pressed you or made it your responsibility to deal with." And he was correct. He never had. But I was too defensive and irritated to acknowledge it. Instead, I doubled down. "We'll figure it out," I said. "It's disgusting, and I'm tired of it." Austin just stared at me for a long time, and I noticed something altering in his countenance. Not necessarily angry, but as if he was processing something difficult. "Okay," he said finally. "I understand." Then he went to bed without saying another thing. I sat on that couch feeling righteous, but also slightly ill to my stomach. Deep down, I realized I had been harsh. Austin had shown me love and want in the only manner he knew how, and I had found it filthy. But I was too proud to go apologize, and part of me was happy that he had backed off a little. I had no idea I had started a chain reaction that would destroy everything nice in our marriage. Austin was not the sort to fight or argue back. He simply accepted what I said and resolved to protect himself in the best way he knew how. And that protection was going to harm me more than I had anticipated. That night, he did not try to cuddle me in bed as he usually did. He remained on his side, and when I awoke in the morning, he was already up and preparing for work. He did not give me a good morning kiss or lengthy hug before leaving. Just a polite good day, and he was gone. I told myself it was only momentary, that he was still absorbing what I had said. But looking back, that's when everything shifted between us. I had rejected the essence of how he demonstrated love, and Austin being the guy he was decided to honor my wishes in the most literal sense possible. The change was quick and complete. Austin transitioned from being the most physically affectionate husband I knew to scarcely touching me at all. No more random hugs during the day. No more playful butt slapping in the kitchen. No more drawing me close to the couch while we watched TV. He'd give me a quick kiss goodbye in the morning if I started it, but there was no lingering or deepening of the kiss. Nothing that would thrill him and disgust me. Initially, I felt relieved. Finally, I could simply dwell in my own home, without feeling as if every conversation was fraught with sexual tension. I could embrace my husband without turning him on and cuddle on the couch without his body responding. It's just what I was looking for. But toward the end of the first week, something seemed odd. I was doing dishes one evening when Austin strolled past me to get something from the refrigerator. Normally, he would have gripped my waist, smacked my buttocks, or muttered something flirtatious. Instead, he simply said, "Excuse me," and continued about his business. It felt really official, like we were roommates rather than married. When I tried to bring it up wondering why he had stopped being affectionate, Austin's response was so reasonable that I wanted to scream. "You said my physical responses were disgusting," he replied quietly. "I do not want to risk becoming aroused and making you uncomfortable again." I argued that he couldn't show me affection without getting thrilled, trying to point out how stupid he was acting. But Austin simply shrugged and replied, "It happens naturally when I'm close to you. Because I have no control over it. The only remedy is to avoid situations in which it could occur." The worst part was that he sounded sensible. He seemed to have considered my complaint and determined that this was the most sensible course of action. However, that was not what I was looking for. I wanted him to find a method to be loving without eliciting a sexual response rather than abandoning affection completely. "So you're just going to punish me indefinitely because I begged you to tone things down." I asked him one night after he gently refused to snuggle as we watched a movie. He said, "I'm not punishing you without looking at me. I respect your boundaries. You made it apparent that my physical responses make you uncomfortable. Therefore, I'm making sure that doesn't happen again. Despite his attempts to seem impartial, I could sense the hurt in his voice. And that's when I realized I could have gone too far. But rather than apologizing, I became defensive. Why should I apologize for asking my husband to control himself? Why was I the bad guy for refusing to feel sexualized whenever he touched me? But the truth is, I was beginning to miss feeling desired. I missed the way Austin looked at me as if I were the most beautiful lady in the world. I missed feeling desirable, attractive, and irresistible by my own husband. He gazed at me in the same way he looked at everyone else, polite and respectful, but lacking the unique spark that used to make me feel so special. I began to initiate more wanting to rekindle some of that old love, but Austin would respond just enough to avoid rejecting me totally, then back off before things got too heated. He seemed to be keeping himself on a tight leash, and I despised it. 3 months into our marriage, I felt more undesired than ever before. I'd get dressed up thinking Austin would congratulate me, but he'd only say I looked well. He used the same tone while commenting on the weather. I would try to be flirtatious or suggestive, but he would simply smile pleasantly and change the conversation. The irony was not lost on me. I grumbled about being sexualized, but suddenly I felt entirely desexualized. Austin was treating me just how I had requested, as if I could be touched without eliciting any sexual response, and it was making me unhappy. By month 4, I was going insane. Austin had become a polite, distant version of himself, and I was beginning to worry that I had irrevocably damaged our relationship. He still did lovely things for me, helped around the house, and inquired about my day. But it all felt so superficial, as if he was going through the motions of being a nice spouse without any of the love or desire that used to motivate his acts. I did everything to get a reaction from him. I'd put on his favorite outfits, cook his favorite foods, and choose movies he'd enjoy. But Austin had obviously mastered the knack of admiring me without becoming aroused by me. And this was driving me mad. How was this the same man who used to get turned on simply by seeing me in his t-shirt? The worst aspect was his cool demeanor about everything. When I became frustrated and asked why he was so aloof, he'd explain in the same rational tone that he was simply being respectful. When I pointed out that we no longer had much physical contact, he reminded me that I had termed his natural responses repulsive. Therefore, he was avoiding that. But I didn't mean you should shut down entirely. I eventually snapped one night after he graciously refused to take a shower with me, something that used to be a regular enjoyable experience for us. Austin glanced at me with tired eyes and said, "I don't know how to want you like I used to without my body reacting the same way it always has. You cannot ask me to desire you while not demonstrating that desire." So I decided not to put any of us in that position. I wanted to shake him. This was not what I had asked for. I wanted him to be able to control his physical responses rather than completely shutting down his desire for me. But every time I attempted to explain it, he said he couldn't control those reactions. This is how masculine bodies work. Around month 5, Austin had to travel on a 6-day work trip. Normally, I would have missed him greatly, and he would have phoned me every night wanting to talk for hours. This time, our chats were quick and cordial. He would ask about my day, tell me about his meetings, and then say goodbye. No flirting. No, I miss you. Not to mention how much he was looking forward to seeing me. When he returned, something was different. Not simply the detached civility he'd been displaying for months, but something more. He appeared more thoughtful and composed in some manner, as if he had figured something out while he was abroad. I attempted to greet him home the same way I used to, with hugs, kisses, and pleasure at having him back. But Austin reacted in the same way he'd been replying to everything politely, briefly, and without much excitement. It felt like hugging a stranger who was trying to be polite to me. That was when the true panic set in. I'd been telling myself that this was only temporary, that Austin would eventually get over his injured feelings and everything would return to normal. But looking at him after that trip, I knew this could be who he was today. This nice, aloof man treated me as if I were a roommate he liked but wasn't crazy about. I began to worry what had transpired during his journey. Had he met anyone? Had he finally realized he was happier without all of the drama I had been putting him through? The notion of Austin moving on from me, finding someone who valued his desire rather than calling it nasty, made me sick to my stomach. But instead of apologizing or attempting to repair what I'd shattered, I became enraged. This was his fault for being overly dramatic about everything. Normal individuals would have found a midway ground rather than shutting down totally. He was punishing me, and he was undoubtedly thinking about other women who wouldn't find his interest repulsive. I had no idea how correct I was about the last part, or how much worse things were about to get. 2 days after Austin returned from his business trip, my life fell apart. We were having dinner, one of those polite surface-level talks we'd been having for months, when Austin abruptly dropped his fork and looked at me with a serious expression. He told Kendra, "I don't think we're sexually compatible anymore. Perhaps we should consider separating." I actually choked on my dinner, what I was able to get out once I stopped coughing. "Where does this come from?" Austin was silent for a minute, as if he was choosing his words carefully. Our intimacy dwindled to nearly nothing after he told me my attraction to you was horrible. I've been thinking about it a lot, especially while I was away, and I don't think it's sustainable for either of us. But that's not what I meant. I explained, terror swelling in my chest. I only wanted you to tone it down a little rather than quit totally. Austin responded, "I can't tone down something I can't control, and I can't live in a marriage where my wife finds my desire for her disgusting. It is not fair to any of us." That's when he dropped the true bombshell. He told me about his business trip and how one evening after a work dinner, some of his colleagues went to a bar. Present was a younger woman, present perhaps in her mid-20s, who had begun flirting with him. He was certain that nothing untoward had occurred, but the attention had caused him to realize something. "I haven't felt wanted in months," he admitted gently. "This stranger expressed more gratitude to me in one chat than you have since calling me filthy." And that's when I understood how unhappy I had become. I felt like I was about to puke up. "So, you want to leave me for some random female at a bar?" "No," Austin replied forcefully. "I want to go because I deserve to be with someone who does not find my attraction to them offensive. Someone who likes being desired rather than dismissing it as repulsive." I began crying ugly, desperate cries. "I never claimed you were repulsive. I was simply stressed and overwhelmed." "You're exaggerating the situation." But Austin wasn't buying it anymore. "You called it filthy, Kendra. You described it as unpleasant and disgusting. Do you know what that did to me? I spent 3 years believing I was fortunate to have a wife I was so drawn to, and you made me feel like a pervert for wanting my own wife." "That's not what I meant," I kept repeating. But as soon as the words came out, I realized how feeble they sounded. I'd said those things. I termed his desire nasty. Austin continued, "And it's not limited to that one moment. You never compliment me, initiate anything, or make me feel as if you desire me at all. I'm always the one chasing, expressing desire, and you simply accept it. Until you realized even that was too much." I tried to protest and enumerate all the ways I demonstrated love, but Austin simply shook his head. "When was the last time you said I was attractive? When was the last time you initiated intimacy? When was the last time you made me feel like you genuinely desired me, rather than merely tolerating my attention?" I couldn't respond because he was correct. I had grown so accustomed to being sought and desired that I had never bothered to respond. I had taken his continual attention for granted, and then grumbled when it was inconvenient for me. "So, what, are you just given up?" I inquired, desperation making my voice loud. "You're willing to toss away 3 years of marriage for one fight." Austin lamented that this isn't about a single battle. "This is about the fact that you don't want me in the same way that I want you, and you resent me for desiring you." That is not a marriage, Kendra. That's me being grateful for bits of affection from someone who thinks my love is filthy. When I questioned if he'd cheated with the woman at the bar, Austin gave me a disappointed expression. "The fact that you quickly presume the worst of me demonstrates my point," he said. "I informed you about her because I believe in honesty, not because I did anything wrong. But instead of hearing how sad I am, you are more worried with whether I betrayed you." That night, Austin slept in the guest room, and for the first time, I knew I might lose him. Not to another lady, but to my own selfishness and lack of appreciation for what I had. Even still, despite the fact that my marriage was on the verge of disintegration, a part of me believed he was exaggerating. Part of me still blamed him for being overly sensitive to a comment I made during a difficult situation. I had no idea how bad things were about to get or how quickly I'd lose all I'd taken for granted. The next 3 weeks were a nightmare that only got worse. Austin was not just threatening to depart, he was actually doing it. He began staying in the guest room on a permanent basis, speaking with lawyers and looking at flats, and the worst aspect was how calm and determined he appeared to be about everything. I tried everything to persuade him to reconsider. I cried, apologized, and vowed things would be better. But Austin's eyes told me he was already gone, that he had grieved our marriage and moved on while I was still trying to heal it. When I begged him for another opportunity, he said, "I've spent 6 months trying to be the husband you wanted, someone who can show you affection without desire or love, you without wanting you. Do you know what I learned that is not love? That's simply going through the motions." I began searching his social media like a crazy person looking for traces of the woman from the bar or any other woman. What I discovered was worse than infidelity. Austin had been reconnecting with old acquaintances, pursuing interests that I had steadily discouraged him from, and going to therapy. He was becoming into this confident, happy version of himself that I scarcely recognized. When my buddies realized Austin was no longer present, they began asking questions. When I tried to tell what happened while sounding like the victim, I noticed them exchanging glances. Sarah genuinely asked, "You called him disgusting for being attracted to you." "Kendra, that's quite cruel." Even my own friends were on his side. They remembered all of my comments about Austin being overly affectionate and constantly getting fired up. And now they were staring at me as if I was nuts for trashing that. Do you know how many women would give anything to have a husband who is still attracted to them after 3 years? My friend Lisa inquired. But the true gut punch came when I learned from mutual acquaintances that Austin was seeing someone. Not the woman at the bar, someone fresh he'd met in his therapy group. A 26-year-old teacher who clearly felt Austin was outstanding and wasn't afraid to show it. I drove past the coffee shop where I had heard they liked to meet, and I noticed them together. Austin seemed thrilled. I hadn't seen such genuine happiness in months. He was smiling and joking, and when she touched his arm while they were conversing, he didn't back away or appear uncomfortable. He leaned forward as if he was starved for such attention. That's when I realized what I'd actually lost. Not just a spouse, but a man who loved me unconditionally and made me feel like the most attractive woman in the world. After 3 years of marriage, I had someone who couldn't keep his hands off of me, and I had thrown it away because it was inconvenient at times. I tried to contact Austin one last time, showing up at his new apartment with a big letter explaining how sorry I was and how much I had learned. But Austin seemed fatigued when he saw me. He softly explained to Kendra, "I'm with someone now who makes me feel good about wanting her, someone who tells me I'm attractive, initiates closeness, and does not make me feel like a creep for being turned on by my partner." I can't go back to feeling humiliated about wanting the person I'm with. I insisted that I could change. I know I made mistakes and I can improve. Austin shakes his head. "You had 6 months to change, and I begged you to work on us through my actions. Instead, you became irritated that I was no longer chasing you. Even today, you are not truly sorry for what you said. You're only sorry for the consequences." And he was correct. Even as I stood there crying and apologizing, a part of me felt he should have handled my criticism better, found a way to make me happy rather than shutting down entirely. I still didn't grasp that calling someone's love disgusting isn't something you can just recover from. 6 months later, I am sitting in my empty house. Austin grabbed half of the furniture when he moved out, while his new girlfriend shared photos of them together on social media. She tags photos with phrases like, "Can't believe this amazing man is mine," and "I feel so loved and appreciated." I never bothered with these captions since I took Austin's loyalty for granted. He looks amazing in every photo, confident, joyful, and pleased. He feels like he's finally with someone who values what he has to offer rather than dismissing it as filthy. In me, I'm alone, wondering how I managed to ruin the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too self-centered and ungrateful to appreciate it while it was still there. But even now, a part of me wishes he had fought harder for us. Part of me thinks he gave up too quickly. And that's probably why I'm sitting here alone. I still don't get it. I still don't grasp that love isn't something you can criticize and control while expecting to keep receiving. Some lessons, it appears, are only learned after it is too late to matter.